Okay, so podcast style. I guess this is how this is starting here. Yeah, it's been a while since we did one of these, so a lot of this is going to be off the cuff, and forgive us if it is, well, a little odd. There's going to be a lot less structure when it comes to this kind of thing. We're still deciding at this point exactly what to do in terms of, say, recording when you can see me like this, or if we're going to be doing, say, more audio-only things, whether that is going to be cleaner or not, but who knows. Anyway, Gabby, today's topic. What are we talking about?
Badass women in history.
Okay.
Do you have like a top three? What are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the top three, and I got some of this prepared here for what it is that we're going to be doing. So there are three that immediately come to mind in terms of, say, ability and what they did, right? So when you're typically thinking of a badass, this is not a moral argument, all right? You're not saying that someone did something objectively good morally. You're saying that what it is that they did is genuinely impressive for the scope of what it was. And I've said this before. Genghis Khan was a badass. Genghis Khan was also a monster. That is how that works.
Some would say that it's very difficult to become a badass without being kind of a horrible person. Like, even your favorite superheroes, they might be badass superheroes, but they're not great people. Like, they try, but ultimately when you have that a certain level of power, or you get to like a certain point of like impressiveness, you've stomped on a few people or a million
and faces,
people.
lots of faces.
Exactly, to get to the point that you are. So badasses aren't good. We're not using that term to say they're good, morally good, right, in the right, correct. We're not agreeing with them. They're categorized as badasses simply because of the actions that they took.
Mm-hmm. And of the three that I got here, I think the last one you'll see demonstrate that it demonstrates it the most. So first off, Tomarus, my personal favorite, and Vey, the one that if we got a divorce and we traveled back in time, then this is definitely the individual that I would definitely go after. Though I may not need to go after her.
I don't think she'd want you to.
No, she would kidnap me. She would kidnap me, maybe hold me for ransom, then I would charm her. Hopefully. Either that or I'm just going to be executed. Hopefully I'm not Persian at that time.
The second part is more likely.
So here is who Tomarus was, for those of you who don't know. Tomarus was the queen of the Muscotai. And the Muscotai were a tribe. They were a tribe of Scythians. And for those of you who don't know what Scythia is, essentially it is the Black Sea. Think the area that encompassed the north of the Black Sea from north of Greece past Dacia, and where modern day Romania and Bulgaria that is. So north of there, going around the Black Sea into, say, northern Iran. That is where it is. And the Muscotai were the tribe that were on the Iranian side. They could be treated as the ancient Iranians. And they were nomads, so horse archers, something that especially in the old world were very overpowered. Like, horse archers just dominate essentially everything. Now,
who is the guy that Tomarus defeated? And we couldn't cover it on TikTok, so I think this is the best place to cover it.
That would be Cyrus the Great. So there were a lot of, say, great Persian leaders. And the Persian Empire is one of the largest and greatest in history. And Cyrus the Great, one of the largest and greatest leaders. And what essentially happened is that the Persians were expanding north into Muscotai territory. But the problem with horse archers is you can't really catch them. They're very difficult to actually try and trap into a pitched battle. And this is especially common with nomads, because there is no cities for them to actually capture. They're just kind of on the move. So, since the Persians could not capture the Muscotai, since they were constantly raiding all their supply lines, what it is that they did is they tricked them. So, they left their supply train basically out, basically in an area where their camp could just be raided and they didn't have any guards. So the Muscotai captured their camp and drank all of their wine. Yeah, no, they
that's what I would
They basically left all of their alcohol in this camp to lure them in. And then when the Muscotai came in, which was actually led by the son of Tomarus. They drank themselves into a stupor, and then couldn't actually fight in the pitched battle when the Persians turned around and attacked them.
Valid.
So they basically all got captured from this war party. The son of Tomarus, who I cannot pronounce the name of here, so I'm not even going to try there, he was captured and ended up committing suicide.
Oh.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what happens there. He didn't want to be killed or executed, so he basically killed himself before it could happen. And Tomarus, who was queen, promised revenge. And in the next battle, actually challenged the Persians directly into battle and led her entire army against them. So she actually led the military going into this. We don't necessarily know how much it is that she directly participated, but considering what the Scythians did, according to Greek historians, where the women would actually participate in battle as archers. And this is something that the Scythians were famous for burning off one of their breasts so that they could actually fire bow and arrows while riding.
Also known as problems I would never
No,
have.
definitely not going to be a problem in your favor. For me, it might be a problem, but definitely not for you. And this is something that she won. And reportedly, Cyrus the Great was killed, and she had his head cut off and crucified. Like, they hung his head up on a crucifix, basically. Yeah. That's how that was done. So, I mean, she was a badass. She got her revenge. But that is what was done as a leader, right? There's a lot more that you could say that was personal for some of these women. And the next one on this list definitely took a more personal, brutal approach to it here, rather than being a leader. And that is Ludmila Pavlichenko.
Oh, you've talked about her, yeah.
I have. AKA Lady Death. Now the thing with Ludmila, and I think that I need to do a dedicated video on her, like not just one that is podcast style, but one in which we tell more of her story, because there's been a series of movies and everything about her. It's really insane. She is one of the most prolific snipers to ever exist in human history. I believe that in terms of ranking, she's like 4th or 5th in history in terms of like number of kills. Maybe even more if you look at unconfirmed, but she reportedly has 309 confirmed kills. Yeah. And
how does one become a sniper?
well, I mean, there's a lot of steps, but it also depends on what military you're in, what you're exactly specializing as a sniper. I mean, there's a lot of different rules that go into
I was
it.
like, maybe sniper could be my next career move, but I have bad vision, so maybe not, right? Maybe I can get really
yes.
close, but then I guess it's not sniping.
Yeah, no, Gabby, just go into the battlefield, jump in front of someone off a ledge, like behind a rock wall, 360 no scope, and just
Okay,
do that.
we get it. Ludmilla has great eyesight and great aim.
Yeah. So this was also back during World War II. And she and the Soviet Union would face off against German snipers and like counter snipers that were going after her and her partners, like for her teammates, for what she was working with. And she went through multiple artillery strikes, would get wounded, would get knocked out of action, would just keep on going back in. And this is just something that she just kept on going and going and going. Because in the Soviet Union, it was equal. Anyone could be a meat shield and go and fight, because that's... Damn, it was brutal. Yeah, everyone is equally good at being thrown against the enemy. And that is how that went down. So yeah, again, she personally had 309 kills and was known as Lady Death. In fact, later on in the war, she would be taken back into the reserves and shipped over to the United States as part of a... I'm not going to use the term propaganda, but specifically as something that was done as part of PR for the Soviet Union and to encourage the United States to get more into the war, become more dedicated. So she actually became friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. Like, they were actually friends and basically became pen pals, like the First Lady of the United States. Because when she was introduced to the United States, they didn't actually take her seriously. When she was...
Oh, I remember
Yeah,
this. The
so-
press just wrote very sexist articles about her, basically, right?
Yeah. Well,
Which-
even in terms of the articles, it wasn't even the articles that were the problem, because they actually were more favorable to her afterwards, because she basically shamed them. But the initial questions, everything that she was asked in terms of interview, was like talking about makeup and the uniforms, and like how it was that it was affecting her, like her social life and other things. And it was just like,
seeing a cold-blooded killer and just going, man, her outfits are ugly. Honestly, that takes a lot of balls. Like, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't recommend it.
like, and the thing is, she wasn't what I would necessarily call pretty in the first place, but she was an individual that she was most certainly strong, and I don't think would give a rat's ass about her appearance. She is someone that genuinely would, if you looked at her the wrong way, if she took offense to it, she might just snap your head, because screw you. She was definitely a badass. And this is where it is the best moment for her. When she was going in around on this PR campaign, and when she was brought forth in front of a crowd of men, she shamed them by stating something along the lines of, I have killed over 300 men myself. What are you doing? Are you going to hide behind my skirts? Something along those lines. And it's just...
That's a fair criticism of them, honestly.
Oh! Needless to say, that next week, the recruiting office in that local area, which I can't remember the name of the stadium where she was that gave that, it doubled the amount of people that were signing up to go up to war. It was kind of like that incident with the women in the white feathers back during World War I in Britain, except actually better because this one legitimately made sense.
So, question. For her to become a Soviet sniper, was it common to have female snipers? Was it common to have female, like, military people of that caliber?
Not in the beginning.
Or
And
was it harder for her to achieve what she achieved?
oh yeah, it absolutely was. And the thing is that there were all female, like, groups,
Like
fighting
Night
battalions
Witches?
that were made, yeah, such as the Night Witches. But even then, this did not occur into the beginning of the war. Say in 1941 when Germany invaded, even at that time, women were actually excluded from frontline combat. It wasn't an immediate thing for the Soviet strategy. Women did not really get to participate more, and even then it was select groups that did. Like, you'd find them more as, say, elites of their specific caliber.
Okay.
And that is something that would occur going into late 1942 into 1943. Because by that time, after Operation Barbarossa, basically the Soviets needed to put every single body that they could forth. That if you weren't in the factory, you were on the front line. Because that was exactly what they needed in order to defend. Because the Germans were making huge strides going into the war. Like, I genuinely believe that with the way that it was going, the Soviets would have been able to turn it around, but that was only due to immense sacrifice for what it is that they put forth. And women were one of the ones that had to participate, because you were going to contribute, one way or another, with your blood or with your sweat, maybe both.
Okay.
And that's how that was going to work.
Absolutely terrifying.
Yep. The third and final one would be Qin Shi. Or Qin Shi?
Pirate Queen.
Qin Shi, yeah, the Pirate Queen of China.
When we made the video on Ludmilla, when we made the video on Tomris, everyone's like, what about the Pirate Queen? So, this is your Pirate Queen, people.
So, I'm not going to go in and tell the full story. If I wanted to go in and talk about the full story, this is going to need a dedicated video that just states her biography. So I'm going to sum it up very quick for how nuts it was that she was able to achieve this. So think of it like this. It is China. It is the early 1800s. It is the Qing dynasty. The Qing dynasty at this point was actually, it was a Manchu creation, which Manchu, that was the northern tribe actually above China. So not the Mongols. The Manchu were the Jurchen. It was an entirely different tribal group, but they were also steppe nomads. And they had actually taken over the Ming dynasty of China and created the Qing dynasty. And by the 1800s, China was not doing so hot. They were far behind the rest of the world, particularly the Europeans, technologically. And they were really only kept in power just by sheer force of bureaucracy and numbers. But by the 1800s, the Brits and other forces were effectively able to dominate them. and you had opiates, specifically opium, that was becoming very widespread amongst the populace.
They had an opioid crisis in China?
Massive. Like the First and Second Opium War, for everything that occurred.
Oh, there was a war?
Oh yeah, literally so that the Brits could continue to sell opium to China. Yeah, the Brits were drug traders. Yeah, they did that.
We're going to have to cover that.
Yeah.
Obviously, because I have a lot of questions.
Yeah. And the whole reason why they did that in the first place was because China basically wouldn't trade. They wouldn't do it. And they had all these goods that were wanted, from tea, like silks. I mean, not even silks at that point. The big thing was tea. Because, of course, the Brits had to get their tea. So that was the thing. Yeah, I know, literally.
Insert joke about Britain and tea.
Yeah, so that's essentially what happened there. But it wasn't just that China was a market that they wanted to buy goods from, they also wanted to sell goods. But China refused to buy any outside goods because they didn't want to. Anything that they had or that the officials wanted, they would just be able to do themselves, even if it wasn't actually good.
I think it's a bit ironic. They came from never wanting to trade to, like, a trade superpower right now. Like,
oh, yeah.
China is huge on trade. Like, that's their thing right now.
But, like before, China does not import. That's the thing. Even now to this day...
Well, why would you import when you make everything? Like,
yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, there's a question of
you?
quality for a lot of the stuff, but in the first place, that's
Quantity sometimes trumps quality.
Yeah. So, what essentially happened was that China would not export, or they would not import any goods. So in order to purchase anything from China, you could not trade in goods, you had to trade in silver. Like cold, hard cash. And that is the only thing that they would actually accept. The Spanish actually were able to do this for many years because they were able to mine copious amounts of silver out of South America. That's actually where a lot of the mines, that's why that became so big, was that it was the Spanish mining silver, not gold, silver, that they could then ship to China to get spices and other goods in order to be able to take back to Europe.
Sorry, the colonization was making my eye twitch.
So that's where that happened. Well, now we're going to cover a lot of the stuff here for China in the future. But, anyway, back to Qing Shi. So Qing Shi was a prostitute during this time. And opium was rampant. It was all across the country. And basically the entire bureaucracy and everything in there was highly decayed. And so since the central government did not have any kind of authority that they could really exert in a lot of the external provinces, she was from a very poor area of Guangdong, I believe is what it was. And she was reportedly extremely beautiful and very popular because she was not only stunningly beautiful, she was also very intelligent. And so when you would typically buy a prostitute, a higher class prostitute, one that you'd be bringing in, wasn't just someone that you used for sexual favors. This was someone that you would have poetry, maybe even theater, something that was recited to, conversations with, and then also the dirty stuff. But that pretty much went hand in hand. So she was very popular in the area, and a captain of a large fleet of around 200 ships basically fell in love with her, and kidnapped her, and married her. And that's how that happened. But she basically saw this as something that she could use to her advantage, because she was now in a very big position of power. So very quickly, within a few months, those 200 ships became 1,800 ships.
Because of her?
Basically, I mean, yeah, she managed finances. She did a whole lot of other things. So here's the thing.
She have like Cleopatra vibes, but like, if Cleopatra was an underdog and she didn't already start in a position of power.
It gets way more brutal than this. So here's what Qing Shi did. She implemented a large number of reforms, which I'm just going to go off and I'm going to read some of these here because there's so many things that she did that I just need to pull this up and just go off what it is that she did. So, first off, so she controlled what goods were actually taken and how it was all accounted. So, pirates who gave unauthorized orders or who refused to follow orders were executed. She implemented harsh codes of discipline through her husband that this is exactly what it was that they did. You either follow orders or you were executed.
So at this point he was just a puppet leader.
Well, he was the leader, but she...
Call the shots?
She didn't necessarily call the shots here yet. Mm-hmm. Once he died, she took over. Another man did not actually control the things. She took over as queen of the pirates.
I think you're quite familiar with, you have power, but I call the shots, so. Anyway, continue.
Okay, so any trade goods that were actually seized were brought forth for inspection. If a pirate withheld goods, like if they kept some gold hidden in their pocket or something along those lines, and it was discovered, then that person would have an appendage cut off. And depending on how much they stole and what it was, how much it was worth, the level of severity would go up. Like, maybe you stole just a few bolts of silk or something like that. You'd lose a finger. Okay, you stole a pot that was made of silver.
We got the idea.
You had a hand cut off.
Yeah, we got the idea. Let's continue.
And it would just get more and more
Yeah.
severe. Sure, here, no, you don't want to hear an excruciating detail?
No, you've painted quite a clear picture, and I think your audience would prefer to hear the rest of that little list.
Okay, so loyalty and honor, if you were forthright with everything, was generously rewarded. So it wasn't just punishment, it was the carrot and the stick. The carrot was very important to this for specifically rewarding followers. And this was very crucial for it here. Female captives are... This is where it comes interesting. So, I don't even know where to start from this. If you were ugly, or pregnant, or sick, you were released. Basically, they wouldn't keep you. Everything here was fine.
I thought it was going to go a different direction, and that is just actually quite nice.
If you were pretty, you stayed a captive.
Okay, well, that sucks.
And she was very crucial in controlling this for it here. I mean, she was a prostitute. She basically knew how to control women and sex. That was a thing. But also, it's also strangely progressive for what she did with other aspects, and we'll get into that. So if you were pretty, you were kept as a captive for one of two reasons. You were kept until you could be ransomed, in which case, hey, you were ransomed for money. Or you were kept, and if a ransom wasn't paid, you just kind of stayed a captive. And eventually, over time, you would be married to one of the pirates. Now, you didn't become a prostitute, typically, you could, but you were married to one of the pirates. But in order for this marriage to happen, it had to be consensual. So both the pirate and the captive woman had to agree to get married. Now,
fair.
Now here's where it gets freaky. So any kind of forced sexual activity from this here, if you forced a woman into sex, you would be executed. Like, hands down, you were immediately executed. That is how that works.
I like her.
All rape, everything for there was completely outlawed. But here's also where it gets trippy. If consensual premarital sex happened, both parties were executed. So,
Understandable.
no sex before marriage. Now, depending on the circumstances...
Sounds like Christian school problem.
Way more severe, though. And then, depending on the circumstances, maybe you were given some leeway. If it happened, there were cases where you were not executed. Instead, the man was made a eunuch, so his balls were cut off, and the woman was exiled. So the woman definitely got off easier if that happened. There was definitely a lot more punishment that was centered around men.
I really like this lady. She seems very fair, very just.
Yeah, so that's also infidelity. So if you cheated on your spouse, execution. Immediate. That's how that worked. So there were a lot of reforms that she implemented, both socially and economically. That's how that went down. Now, this is not one of the reasons necessarily that she's a badass. This just shows her power. What truly makes her a badass is what she did against the government. So she basically led a reign of terror for decades against the government, raiding ports, capturing people, and holding them for ransom. She beat the government. They built multiple fleets and sent them after her, and she crushed them time and time again, even adding their fleet into her own, making herself an even bigger armada that she had.
Wow.
It was nuts. Basically, every army they sent against her, or navy in this case, just ended up making her more powerful. Eventually, it got so bad that there was nothing that they could do. So instead, they had to offer her amnesty. And basically every crew member for her, and mind you, eventually she was leading a fleet with 80,000 men. Not a crew of a few hundred. No. 80,000 men she led. She got amnesty for almost all of them, was given a noble title, and then was able to retire in complete luxury as a noble at the age of 69.
Nice.
No, it was nice. And basically then, at that point, she settled into being a grandma because she married her second in command, had a few kids, and, well, this was all before that. She was a mom and basically a grandma also. She was a grandma and was leading these pirates.
Imagine that being your grandma.
Yeah. So, that is how that happened, and she definitely is a badass.
Okay, I like that list. Those
Yeah.
are pretty good. I think we should do some where we do like wholesome, badass women, badass men. I think that would be really good format for future podcast style YouTube videos.
And we need to get a setup whole thing for it here. Let us know what it is that you think about this, whether you like this kind of format with us just talking. There's not going to be any photos or any of this other stuff for it here up. We're just talking now. But depending on what it is that people want, what we can talk about in the future, or edit, or add in for anything, I don't know what it is. Put your suggestions below. Let us know what it is that you think. And
we're going to be trying to figure out audio and everything, so maybe for longer videos we can download it and upload to Spotify, so we're going to try to figure that out.
because we actually got a good mic here now. And this is one of these things that when we have this set up, we can upload it here onto Spotify or any other kind of service for it here. Because there's Apple too. It really just depends. So the Spotify is probably the one that I would lean towards.
So basically, let us know what you want us to cover. I think podcast styles are a little more laid back. You guys see more energy out of you.
Energy.
Versus your biographies or history lessons. So we'll try to mix these in as well.
I'll try to get better at editing and other things too. I've never learned.
Yeah, like and subscribe and let us know what you think.
Alright, thank you guys. See you next time.